Thank
So,
you.
sure. So this is what, to me and to most Indigenous communities, this is what's really behind a land acknowledgement statement. So first of all, it is recognizing us as original inhabitants of an area, first and foremost. It's also recognizing us as a people. And that sounds obvious, but to most Indigenous communities, that hasn't been the case. And that's not the way it's been throughout history. We were, and to some extent, we believe even today, thought of as less than most other people, and in fact, less than human. So the fact that a land acknowledgement recognizes us as a people is a big deal to people that have not been recognized as such for a long, long time. It is acknowledging the connection of the people to our natural environment. And so Corey touched a bit in his presentation, and really what it means is, you'll never hear me use the word management, although I have to when I say I was honored to co-author the adaptive management plan for Pepperwood. I like the word stewardship. Us as Indigenous people understand that we don't have the ability to manage our environment. That's obvious by what's been happening. Furthermore, we don't believe we have the right. So what we do believe is that we have a place, and we know what our place is and what our responsibility is to try to keep our natural world in balance. And that's not putting us above our animal brothers and sisters, above the land, the water, the air. We're not above anything. We're partners in trying to keep our world in balance. A true land acknowledgement statement acknowledges the effects of colonization simply by acknowledging this is occupied land. You know, I used to have a bumper sticker on the back of my car that simply said, "You are on Indian land." And people would say, "Well, this is not a reservation." I'd say, "Doesn't matter, it's still Indian land." So, you know, most of us live on land. I don't know where all of you are from, but most of us live on land that colonization took from Indigenous communities, from Indigenous people. It wasn't sold, it wasn't traded, it wasn't bartered, it was taken. So by acknowledging that, you know, acknowledging the effects of colonization, you're acknowledging and respecting that that is truly what happened. It's having respect for Indigenous knowledge and realizing that Indigenous people are scientists. And like one of my professors at Arizona State University told me, he said, "Clint," he goes, "you're here to get a master's degree in Indigenous education, but you have a degree that goes back thousands and thousands of years, since time immemorial." And so it's a recognition that we are scientists, we are architects, we are anthropologists, we are doctors, we are lawyers. Before contact, we were those, we held those positions. And within our society, we still do. So it's important for us to have our Indigenous knowledge to be respected, to have respect for Indigenous culture and tradition, to understand that our ways may be different, our views may be different, but what we want for our environment, what we want for our world isn't, you know, the final outcome of what we want isn't much different than what everybody wants. But our culture and our tradition, we go about it a little different way. A true land acknowledgement statement supports continued interaction of Indigenous people with their land. And that's one of the very special things that is with Pepperwood, and how Pepperwood has really opened the land, the doors, their hearts, their minds back to Indigenous people by including us and giving us access to that land to do things according to our Indigenous ways of knowing. So if you really believe in the land acknowledgement that you're putting forth, Are you willing to give and support Indigenous peoples' continued interaction with that land? And finally, support for repatriation and protection of culturally significant items and places. Support repatriation and protection. That is something that doesn't come easy to most agencies, museums, preserves, any of that. So if you really believe in that land acknowledgement statement, then you believe that the things that are a part of that land and that came from that land belong to who? You know, they should be with that land's first inhabitants, and that's Indigenous people. So I'm hoping that a lot of this really sinks in. I think a lot of this pleasantly or unpleasantly probably surprises a lot of folks when they're thinking, well, we acknowledge that somebody else was here first. And again, that's great. But to Indigenous people, it means all of this. It goes much, much deeper than simply acknowledging that somebody else was the first inhabitants of the land. So I was asked to put a land acknowledgement statement together for Pepperwood. And this is what I came up with. So what I put together here said, Pepperwood Preserve sits within the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. We respect and honor past, present, and future generations of Wapo and their continued connection to this land. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather in this beautiful place, and we give our respect to its first inhabitants. So if we go back to that previous slide and you see what happens here, you can see that I'm tying portions of everything about what a land acknowledgement statement means to an Indigenous person into this. Although it doesn't come out and list them in bullet points, it's acknowledging that they're not, you know, that Pepperwood sits within the homeland of Wapo people. That means they're acknowledging the Wapo as a people, that they were the first inhabitants of that land. We respect and honor past, present, and future generations of Wapo. So they're acknowledging our, not only our being, us being a people, they're acknowledging our culture, our traditions, our land stewardship practices, who we are, what we are, and our continued connection to the land. So they're not trying to say, yeah, we acknowledge you, but here's a no trespassing sign, you can't use it. They're also showing the appropriate form of respect when they say they're grateful for the opportunity to gather in this beautiful place. So they're acknowledging and basically thanking the Wapo people for permission to even gather on that place. So even though a little piece of paper that's called a deed says that land belongs to somebody else, they're acknowledging that the true and responsible ownership of that land lies within the Wapo people, and they give the appropriate respect to its first inhabitants. So that's what a land acknowledgement statement means to me. And so we, you know, when I'm asked to help somebody formulate this or give ideas on what a land acknowledgement statement is and what it means, I lay it out for them from an Indigenous perspective, and then I usually wind up giving them some time to think about it. You know, are you sure you want to formulate a land acknowledgement statement?